Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me. Only run very noob as I bring you Bravo gameplay on the Talistar client. Today I'm playing a game against Dorinthea, which has been one of my most requested matchups. So I'm glad I finally got one. I guess it's a little spoiler alert down here, but when sideboarding you don't really know if they're going to be Dawnblade or Decimator Great Axe. So you have to sort of hedge because I think I would want more than 64 cards against Axe. I'd probably want Zealous Belting over something like Red Unmovable, because Red Unmovable is pretty awful into the Axe. Same with just Sink Below and Favor Scene. They're not great into the Axe, although they're fine because sometimes they pump up the Axe and attack you. You block with one card for like 2, and then your defense reaction comes in afterwards and it gets the full 4 value. So they're not like terrible. I'd probably also want Sigil if I knew it was Axe, but I don't really like playing Sigil, Zealous Belting, or Chokeslam into Dawnblade Dory. And I do think Dawnblade Dory is just a little bit more scary. I feel like Decimator Great Axe Dory isn't that bad into us. Like I think it's pretty good into us. The issue is Dawnblade Dory, if you don't come prepared for it, it sort of just runs you over. Like I think Dawnblade Dory is maybe a little bit better of a matchup for Bravo than Decimator Great Axe, but if you're not bringing your defense reactions, of course that's not true anymore. You really need your Sink Belows, your Favor Scenes against Dawnblade, or they're just gonna like blow you up. And I like to have the Red Unmovables as well. From Arsenal, it just blocks 8. If they play like Spoils of War or Steelblade Supremacy or whatever and swing in for 5, you can just block it with Unmovable from Arsenal, and even a +3 attack reaction out of Dawnblade, out of Dory, isn't going to like go over your Unmovable. Sometimes you can even just like block even if it's for more than 5, you just block with the Unmovable and make them go over it still. I go Pummel over Zealous Belting. This is something I kind of go back and forth on. Zealous Belting might be better. It's like 1 more point. The upside of Pummel, though, is you can actually pummel like an attack, like Command and Conquer, and then there it's way better. Also against Axe, it's sort of like sneaky damage, where Zealous Belting is sort of face up. If they want to block out the Zealous Belting, they can choose to do so, where the pummel is kind of like they have to expect the pummel or have a reaction to react to it. Let's just get right into this game. Takes a little while to get into it. All right. Our opponent sort of has an interesting equipment setup. I want to say Helm of the Sharp Eye is something I almost never see out of Decimator Great Axe. Like, I don't even know. I mean, don't they have to give this +5 before they can even activate this? And then this costs 1 to activate. And then they still have to have enough resources to play the card they get off of this. So that's definitely a little weird. I don't know if it's bad, but it seems kind of bad. Like, I feel like the only thing they can really do is have multiple pump spells or yellow or red Felling Swing. And also Courage of Bladehold. It's just blocking because it says that sword attacks cost 1 less this turn. And he doesn't have a sword. Another thing that's interesting is they're only running exactly 60 cards, so I don't think fatigue is going to be an issue for us this game. I forget who won the die roll, but they're going first. If I won the die roll, I would put them going first. I like to go second against Dawnblade, and going second against Decimator Great Axe isn't terrible. Like, of course, it's going to like fatigue you a couple cards, but being able to have a full tempo 4-card hand to throw into them generally will get you those cards back on fatigue rate. They just attack us for 4 with Great Axe, and I have a Crippling Crush in hand that I want to throw on my turn, so I just end up blocking 5. They don't pitch a blue, so I'm thinking I don't really need to throw the Buckling Blow in there either, because if they want to pump this attack up, they either need exactly what you see here in Iron Song Response, or they're going to need to pitch to play something like Out for Blood. They do end up having the Iron Song Response, so we leak 2 here, but honestly, not a big deal. We're happy to get those Iron Song Responses out of their deck, because those are generally sort of scary cards that once they're out of their deck, you no longer have to play around it. Definitely a little scarier in Dawnblade because they have more on-hit effects that you want to stop, but also against Axe, you just kind of want to not have to worry about that card. We don't draw another blue, so we actually can't even play our Crippling Crush, which is sort of unfortunate. But here, just making a Surge with Tech Plating and hammering for 6 is fine. I think I'm going to keep Sink Below and Crippling Crush, and then Arsenal the Crippling Crush. Maybe I Arsenal the Sink Below too. I honestly don't really know what would be better. I guess if I Arsenal the Crippling Crush, it's more susceptible to something like Command and Conquer. So maybe Arsenaling the Sink Below is better because Sink Below is not great against Decimator Great Axe, so even if he Command and Conquers me, it's like fine. We see they have a Sink Below, so it looks like they're going to just take 2. But yeah, pretty unfortunate that our 4-card hand that we sort of get for free because we went second can only hammer for 6. That's definitely like the most reasonable floor, although it can get a lot worse if you just don't have a blue or don't have 2 cards that cost 3 or more. You can end up hammering for 4. But that's very rare, I would think. So we Arsenal the Crippling Crush. Arsenaling the Sink Below might have been slightly better, but we Arsenal the Crippling Crush, and we draw a hand with only 1 blue. Luckily for us, we have the Sink Below, so we can sink a card. They have a full, or I guess not quite full, they have a 3-card hand with an Arsenal, so a 4-card hand, and then they just throw Decimator Great Axe for 4. To me, this would indicate they have like some pump spells behind. Maybe they can like give it go again with Glint and play a Command and Conquer or something. But I am looking to just Sink Below away this Spinal Crush to hopefully draw blue, so I can throw a Crippling Crush and then still have a Crippling Crush in Arsenal. Hopefully he just plays like some pump spells, and I just take a little bit of damage, which I think would be fine. Again, back to them only playing 60 cards. I think just fatiguing them with damage should be like a fairly straightforward plan with them only having 60 cards. Interesting. It looks like I just block with Spinal Crush here. Maybe I'm afraid of the pump spell? But Spinal Crush plus Sink Below only blocks 6, so even a pump spell for +3 would let him sort of hit me for any on-hit effects that might come, like Refraction Bolters or what have you. They just end up throwing a blue Overpower at me. So no on-hit effects. They don't have a card behind, so they can't even crack their Bolters, but we are going to get rid of the Crippling Crush with the Sink, looking for a blue to play our Crippling Crush. We don't get a blue, but we do get a red that can threaten their arsenal and make a Surge for our Crippling Crush and for our Crippling Crush in our arsenal. So if it's not a blue, I think that's probably like the best red we could have drawn there. Especially considering we don't have the Choke Slams on our deck, we couldn't have drawn like a 4 for 8 that would have been discounted from our Surge. So yeah, I think we would have rather had a blue here, but we drew about the best possible red we could have. So can't complain. Lower their hand size. We draw our 3rd Crippling Crush, and we have a bunch of blues. So I'm actually just sort of looking to take a bunch of damage here, and then maybe dominate a Crippling Crush. Maybe even blocking with one card is reasonable, so our first Crippling Crush isn't dominated, and they might still use their arsenal if it's a defense reaction. Yeah, it looks like I'm just going to block for 2 and see what they do to us. They don't do anything. They just take 2 and sort of IP themselves with their card in hand. And we get to just throw a Crippling Crush here, which should buy us enough time for our second Crippling Crush to be able to get played without us really like having to sacrifice a whole bunch of life. Not that we had to sacrifice a ton of life for this one. If they're only swinging for 4, it's pretty easy to like resolve our big threats, right? Like Decimator Great Axe Dory isn't really doing anything scary. Sometimes they can come in with a big axe that they gave like +6. Sometimes they go like Spill Blood, Steelblade Supremacy, and force you to maybe use some armor. But really, I don't like to use armor unless they play a pump spell that pumps their weapon for the whole turn. Because if they use Refraction Bolters, I really want it to be on a turn where they're not getting like extra value on it, right? They give us just all the armor. So they must have a good hand here. Well, I don't think that this was a good enough hand for them to use all their armor for. I think they're probably just supposed to like Steelblade Shunt plus maybe 2 armor and then just swing for 4 or something. Or maybe not even, excuse me, maybe not even use armor, just like block for 9 from hand using a shunt, a 3 block, and then pitching for the shunt, and then holding a blue to hammer or to access for 4. Because they gave this axe go again, but they don't have any cards in hand to actually utilize it. So let's see what we're gonna do. We have a red unmovable in hand, which is pretty bad. It costs 3 and it only blocks 4. We have a Sink Below. We could Sink Below our unmovable, hoping that we don't hit second cycle. End up taking, what would it be, 4 here, and hope that we draw blue to like dominate the crippling. If they gave us all this armor, I have to sort of assume that their arsenal isn't a defense reaction. Like, I think they would have used that on our crippling last turn instead of giving us all their armor. So I sort of do like dominating the Crippling Crush here based on the read that they just don't have a defense reaction arsenal, because I'm assuming that they would have used it last turn. That's the play we make. We end up taking 4. They get some coppers for whatever that's worth, and we get to dominate this Crippling Crush. Even seeing that they pitched a red Steelblade Shunt, so they only have 2 in their deck, presumably, to try to stop this Crippling Crush. Although, they're on Courage of Bladehold, so Steelblade Shunt is honestly not that good. I feel like Steelblade Shunt, you need to be running Tunic. They just take 11? Very odd play from our opponent. This hand looks like a blocking hand if I ever saw one. So how are we going to just block this X? Honestly, I'm probably just going to block with Imposing Visage and then maybe Sink Below. Actually, maybe I just block with Sink Below. Just block with Sink Below, don't sink anything, and then we can hammer for 6 and Arsenal or Rouse. Rouse being one of our better threats into this matchup, it just sort of fatigues them a bunch or does a bunch of damage. We sort of see that they're willing to take a bunch of damage. I mean, they just took 11 off the crippling, right? So yeah, I just pass. And I don't even Sink Effect because I'd rather just guarantee that my hammer is for 6 while still being able to Arsenal to Rouse. Turning our defense reactions into just 2 blocks doesn't feel great, but our spot definitely does feel great. Knowing they have a bunch of Steel Blade shunts in their deck without Tunic is making me feel good. Knowing that they've used up like a ton of their armor already for not doing too much to us feels good. We just have a bunch of armor left. And we're about to have a Rouse in Arsenal, which definitely a good spot. They just block 4 on our 6, which is fine. We have a hand that can Rouse the Ancients. They have a big hand though, but hopefully we can just like block 2 and, I don't know, take a little bit of damage and be fine. Which it looks like we'll be able to do because they just play a Warrior's Valor and then swing for 7. And I'm totally fine taking 5 here, knowing that they don't have enough resources to pitch into their X. Really wondering what their Arsenal card is. Like, maybe it's like Singing Steelblade? But anyways, we're just gonna give them the Rouse here. Sorry if it's a little noisy. They're doing like some construction in my building. Hopefully it's not too bad for you guys. But yeah, we're just going to Rouse here, and then we're going to hammer for 6, and I think I'm actually going to Arsenal one of these. Maybe. Because being able to keep 2 blues and throw 8 at them is probably better than the Surge, but I'm not sure. Like, sometimes I just make a Surge here, and sometimes I just like Arsenal a card. So we'll see what I do. I end up making a Surge. But yeah, I feel like it's really close because against these slower decks, the Surges aren't as insane as they are like against aggro. And having an 8 in Arsenal is good. Especially for times like these. Like we have another Rouse the Ancients turn. And if we had the 8 in Arsenal, we could go 7 into 8 instead of just 7 into 6. It would be worth 2 more damage, and our Surge is actually like not getting any value this turn. I would suspect I make another Surge here instead of Arsenaling the 8, since I guess in this game that's what I decided on last turn, so why would I change my mind here? But I do think that Arsenaling the 8 is like, if it's not better, it's at least really close. And depending on the day you catch me, I'll probably make a different decision here because it's not so obvious. They just take a bunch of damage. And send the axe. I think on this axe, I'm just going to block with Starstruck and Spinal Crush, which will give me a Surge, and then I'll have 2 Surges, and then I can just pitch a blue to play the other Spinal Crush. The other option is to just block with 1 Spinal Crush, but then holding the yellow is kind of the same thing. I would just end up throwing the Spinal Crush, except I'd get to make a Surge. And like I said before, like the Surge in this matchup isn't like insane. I only really super highly value Surges in the aggro matchups. They're good in other matchups, but in aggro matchups, they're like very, very, very good. So here we're just going to block out. Still kind of wondering what his Arsenal card is. But we get to block, make a Surge with Unity, and then just throw a 2-card 9, which is definitely very good. For fatigue reasons, for damage reasons, for whatever. They full block it. They use a Steel Blade Shunt. But it still ends up like kind of costing them 3 cards because they don't have Tunic. I like Terra Sundering here. I think just blocking with the Imposing Visage, taking 2 damage and Terra Sundering them is fine. They only have 3 armor that they could give us, so they would need a defense reaction in hand. I think it's pretty clear their arsenal's not a defense reaction, or they probably would have used it by now. We gave them a lot of fine opportunities to use it. So I'm expecting this Terra Sunder to be pretty good here. Of course, they could have Fate Foreseen or Sink Below in hand and give us like all the rest of their armor, but I'm more than happy to take that trade. We have all of our armor. We're up 6 life, and we're sending like a 3-card hand at him this turn with the Terra Sunder, so I think it's going quite well for us this game. They had the Fate Foreseen, but they just block 1 with armor. I have a feeling they're going to like undo this. Because why would they block with the armor? Maybe they want to use it because they just drew like a red Felling Swing, but Terra Sunder sort of has an on-hit effect here. So they're not going to be able to do any of that stuff. Yeah, they're just kind of paused here at the Terra Sunder resolution effect, and maybe they're looking for like the undo button because they do have 2 other armor they could use to cover it up. They hit undo, but it doesn't go all the way back, and I guess they end up just letting it hit them. They could revert the turn, but they just end up letting it hit them, which is almost certainly a mistake, as we saw them try to undo. And yeah, we're kind of running away with this game. Best they can do here is swing for 4. I wonder if I just take 4 to throw Starstruck. That seems a little greedy. I feel like blocking 2, Surge, Hammer for 6, and Arsenaling Starstruck is still just like better. Preserve our life total while we can. And I do end up doing that. Sometimes when I'm just like super far ahead, I'll get greedy and just like take a couple extra damage to do something like throw the Starstruck this turn, but you really don't need to do that. You can just hammer for 6. When they're at 9, it's like a huge threat. And with the Surge, the Starstruck next turn is only going to cost 2 blues. So it's just like quite a bit more efficient to do it this way. And it's not like our opponent's going anywhere, so we can just Starstruck them next turn instead of this turn without paying 2 life. Oh, this hand's very awkward. If we want to throw our Starstruck, we sort of can only block with a pummel because our other red in hand is an unmovable, and of course if we want to Starstruck next turn off 2 blues, we can't play the unmovable. And pummel only blocks for 1, so this is like fairly awkward. You know, I think this might be a crown spot where I just block with crown and Crater Fist, sink the unmovable looking for a blue, and then I could potentially like pummel the Starstruck, or even just dominate Starstruck because this card in his arsenal is still there, and I still believe it is not a defense react. So yeah, we're going to use our crown here to just try to fix this hand. Getting rid of unmovable. Of course, we don't really help ourselves here. We just draw another pummel. So I'm going to make a Surge and throw the Starstruck, holding the pummel for Arsenal. I don't think there's too many arguments here for like pummeling the hammer and just keeping Starstruck in Arsenal with another Surge up next turn. I think just throwing the Starstruck actually like forces the issue, and getting them lower on life before we pummel them means pummel might accidentally like kill them when they don't want to, or when they're willing to block but just didn't want to play around pummel. Where the Starstruck is kind of always a card that's they can block unless I dominate it. They can always just kind of like count how much damage it's dealing, 10, and block accordingly. Where pummeling a hammer sort of looks like 6 at first and then turns into 10. We even have a Command and Conquer here we can pummel. So I just block all from hand, or all from armor to not turn on Reprise just in case. And then we're going to pummel this Command and Conquer, and I have to imagine that that will be good enough here. They can play around the pummel, but I don't think they will. And if they die here, we're never going to know what was in their arsenal. Don't know what it could be. Singing Steelblade is like the only card I think it could possibly be. They had a couple turns where they had to pitch a red to play a 1-drop, and then they had to pitch a blue to attack. So I think they didn't ever have a chance to play Singing Steelblade. Oh, I guess maybe when this pummel hits, we'll see what destroys their arsenal. Cash-In was destroyed from arsenal. Very, very weird one here. Helm of Sharp Eye, Courage of Bladehold, Cash-In. There's probably like another weird inclusion that I'm forgetting. But yeah, they wanted to cash in off the copper, I guess. But yeah, I could have never predicted that. So that was that game. Sort of a weird one. I think, maybe it wasn't the greatest showcase of what Axe Dory can do. But I've been on the lookout for a Dory game for a long time, and this is the one I happen to record. Maybe it won't teach you how to play against the very, very top tier Axe Dory players, but hopefully me describing my lines and my thought processes can help you feel better about your chances into Axe Dory. Maybe there's some stuff you were on the fence about that I explain that can at least help you in your future games. Sometimes it can be kind of tough for me to find time to play a bunch of games these days. Life has been like really busy. A lot more hours in my day are being used up in other ways. And so I can't just play like 20 games a day looking for a really good one. I just kind of gotta play handfuls of games, record some of them, and pick based on matchup. I know a lot of people like sort of ask me, or don't ask me, they just make suggestions for what matchups they like to see, and I'm definitely very grateful for that. I think that makes it a lot easier for me to pick and choose what heroes I show, and it's just cool to interact with people and try to answer questions. I love Bravo. I love talking about Bravo. And so yeah, leave a comment down below. Let me know what hero you'd like to see next, what sort of strategies you would like to see. And hopefully this was at least a little bit educational, a little bit, taught you a little bit about maybe how to approach the matchup. There are definitely things that you can identify right off the bat. Like at the beginning of this game, I saw they were only on 60 cards, so I could kind of assume that fatigue wasn't going to be an option for them. And when fatigue's not an option for your opponent on a deck like this, that means it definitely is an option for you. I have 4 more cards in hand. The hammer for 6 is just a little bit more efficient than the hammer for 4 when it comes down to raw damage numbers. Of course, the axe is a little bit harder to block, but I think if you navigate the matchup and you play it a bit, you can kind of see that Bravo's a little better at going over the top. Bravo's a little bit more punishing. Decimator Axe Dory is just sort of doing damage to you, even though sometimes it's like kind of hard to stop. But Bravo's big damage things are like making your opponent discard half their hand, or making it so they don't get go again, or making it so they can't even attack sometimes with Starstruck. So yeah, I think it's just sort of like a value matchup, and you play the value, And also, you utilize armor when you don't want them to activate their refraction bolters. A lot of times, my Axe Dory opponents still have their bolters at the end of the game because I just try to not let them use them at a certain point. Early on in the game, I don't want them to use it when they have like a full turn pump, and at the end of the game, I don't want to let them use it when they have like an extra card in hand for just like an extra 4 damage. So yeah, thanks for stopping by. Comment, like, subscribe down below, and I'll be back tomorrow with another game. So thanks for watching.